good morning, or good afternoon, and welcome everyone. This is the last chapter of our series on methodologies and good practices for process automation project with Bonita. Today we are going to discover what can be done after being in production in order to maximize the benefits of the first iteration and remain in a continuous improvement loop. Therefore, I am pleased to end the loop as we began it with Kai Winkler, Director of NSI Soluciones in Panama, and VP of Services Chapter at ABPMP, who will share with you his wide experience on this subject. Hello, Kai.
Hey, can you hear me well?
How are you?
All good.
Very fine. At home, as
All good.
everybody.
Yes, everybody else. No, thanks for having me back. And as you can see, I grow my in isolation beard. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's great to be back and yeah to be with you together again to finish off the video series and look after the automation, what can be done and how to improve the processes. So and also thanks for everybody joining at this hour and asking a lot of questions, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. And just to tell you that all that you are going to hear today is based on the product and our knowledge on the product. But not only that, it's also based on the experience of our partners like Kai, our consultants, me, for example, because I also have a previous experiences in this field, and more than that, a large number of comments from our users and customers who were kind enough to share with us their way of working and all their feedbacks. That's great to hear from them. So now let's quickly return on the life cycle of your project and where we are today. As you remember, we always talked about a life cycle in 5 phases. The first one, the discovery design, is the goal you want to achieve. Then you are going to implement your application. So develop your application, implement everything, design it. And then in the third phase, you are going to deploy it. And that's what we have seen in the 4th chapter of this webinar. Now that your first project is deployed and is running in production, then what's next? What do you have to do? Well, in order to do that, you would have options. For example, add a new process to your application. You can think that you can improve what has been implemented based on your users' feedback. You can optimize your application further, or you can think about industrializing your application development and the deployment. To do so, you will have to monitor everything in order to be able to get KPIs, facts, feedbacks that are usable, smart, as we say. When we say smart, it's just to say that you can measure it and it's simple to implement, to optimize, and go back to another loop and iterate with a new process or a new version. But how are you going to do that? Kai, what is your opinion about that?
Well, to begin with, I think it's very important to stress the obvious, right? Yeah, as you mentioned, to recognize that yeah, there's a difference between an implementation and then the ongoing maintenance, yeah, management, and improvement of the process. So while that seems maybe very common sense and obvious to everybody from a theoretical point of view, in practice, I've seen that oftentimes fail. So that there's an idea and also some sort of an infrastructure in place where you can make sure that, hey, now that we finished the project, we accomplished successfully. If you joined all our video courses and followed the steps correctly, then it will be successful. Then basically you have to change your mindset into something that now the process is not an application. So it's not necessarily something fixed, an application that has been programmed and it's there, mute and on its own. So the idea is now taking that and bringing it to the next level. And that specifically means looking at what happens within the process, and as you see here on this slide, what happens in terms of feedback the process, all the processes produce. So there are a lot of dimensions to it, and that's not the only way to start, but that's the most common and the most practical way to start with. So what we see here is that there are at least two different dimensions on in terms of monitoring the process. So you have here insights that come basically from the business side of things of the process, and technical insights. And when we say insights, we mean data. So in business, you have things that can help you to engage in data analytics, process analytics, and with that optimize your processes, change your processes, and that maybe in parentheses is something very, very tangible, is something very important we all face. I mean, we are talking basically here from quarantine, and we know that our business processes they have to change drastically to adapt to the new reality. Be it good for the better or the worse, we have to change. And looking at the data and looking at some platforms like the Bonita soft BPMS, you have the tools, and basically with that insights, with those insights, you have also the know-how how to do that. And on the second side, the second dimension would be technical. So looking not only on what kind of results, measurable results, data the processes produced, also looking at how healthy is my environment. Because if we are successful, if we are looking at mission critical processes, we have most likely lots and lots of volumes we have to deal with, and we have to make sure that our solution is speedy. I mean, if we want to be all digitized and want to produce good results, we also want to create a good user experience, meaning that when our end users utilize our processes, they have to be speedy, they have to be intelligently designed, and they have to be responsive. And that's why we also look at the technical output of sites when it comes to data.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that maybe we can start, and I changed the slide, with the business side. As you said, our business is changing. It's always uh, in movement. And here with what is happening to the world, I think we will see drastic changes as well. And that's why we need to keep monitoring and improving the processes, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. So things I've seen so far, so talking to our customers using Bonita Soft, everybody's impacted in one way or another. And many of them, of course, many of our end users and ourselves involved, we have to deal with negative impacts. But there's a silver lining. I mean, there are some advantages to take home from, and one of the advantages is, I think, um, silos or industries that have been kind of resistant to the fact that things have to be digitized. All the hype we saw the last couple of years, like 2 or 3 years of digital transformation, now it's not an option anymore. I mean, there's no way around. So very practical things like now we have to sign reviews and approval of different requests that go through the processes digitally. Yeah, that's not an option anymore. That has to happen. Also, that we think about multi-channel, right? So right now it's elusive to think we can easily and quickly regain brick and mortar operations, so that people go into your branch in order to do their business. Now it will be most likely digital. So it's very good timing for BPM. It's very good timing for automation, but it's very important that we know how to do that. And that's why absolutely the business is changing, and looking at the data, we will gather the evidence and also the how to and what to in terms of business data.
Yeah. And talking about data, I think we have a lot to say.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, so if you remember, there were two general dimensions we wanted to point out, and of course, take that with a grain of salt or two. So basically, what we're trying to say, that's one way of looking at things. So one thing is to differentiate between yeah, process data, business data in general, and technical data, and drilling down a bit within data dimensions, you have process data and pure business data itself. So process data, what you see basically on the left here in green, is meant to be the set of data you get when running processes. So in general, if you look at processes, those are sets of generic data, where you see things like who did what in the process. So Kai, for example, entered in a process, pulled off a request or sent over a request to Delphin. Delphin logs in, and that generates things like timestamps, things like registries of now Kai entered at that specific point of time, this date, and then Delphin, she entered and eventually rejected the case or looped the case back to me because there was information missing. So everything we do produces process-specific data, but generic in the sense that no matter what kind of process you look at, you always get that kind of data. Who logged in, who did what, when. So the keywords, right? And with that, you can also drive a lot of intelligence for your processes, looking at things like bottlenecks or deviations from goals. So if you want to establish some kind of some kind of goal, some KPI, to make sure that, hey, now that everything is digital, or response time, the famous time to yes, as a portion of the process. So whenever somebody requests something, somebody else reviews, and then yet another person approves something, then we have a time to yes portion of a process. We want to comply with that within a margin of 4 working hours. Then that is something very easily, if you know where and how to look for it, to control against your data. So that is basically process data. So you have a bunch of processes, and each one of those processes generates timestamps and process-specific data you can use in order to identify where am I, and also how am I complying, and more importantly, if there's a deviation, what can I do about it? And on the other side, so that's basically the blue rectangle, is everything that has to do with the business side of things. So that in difference to process data, if you compare those two, is not generic anymore. This very much depends on what specific process you have ongoing, right? Yeah, so that can be uh, like the examples we put there, an HR process. So if it is an HR process, you basically look at the forms and the contents you cover in this process. So things like Delphine wants to go to vacation. This request gets to me, and I reject this request because there's no need for vacation. We're all on vacation right now, but you get the idea. So basically, in the HR specific form, we capture things like how many vacation days we have available. What is the period of time Delphine wants to go for vacation? So very specific things to HR. The same goes for other processes, like a banking process for loan origination or customer allocation. So if you want to do that, then most likely you have banking specific information in your forms that generates data specific to that process. And in the end, you create another set of data that is related to the business side of things. And at some point, and we will have a couple of other examples, you want to merge two things together, where you can kind of establish a narrative of what kind of impact does my response time, bottlenecks, workload have over the business data in terms of sales data, sales volumes, customer satisfaction. So the good news is a platform like Bonita Soft always generates two sets of data. And the important thing is to know that they are there, and then secondly, of course, how to access and how to use that information.
Okay, and so how are you going to do that? I mean, there you have to analyze everything.
Yeah, there's a whole field of it's a discipline, right? But specifically for Bonita Soft, you have different entries. So in Bonita Soft, you have something like the reporting engine and the Bonitasoft databases you can access. So Bonitasoft makes it easy to get to the first couple of layers where you go in as a business analyst or an authorized end user, and then pull that information from the repositories in order to start analyzing it. Or you're more like a process analyst, and instead of going into the database side of things, you go through the dashboards. So you look at the live data that's there and analyze that. So, and that's why also we put in this slide yet two different or the additional dimensions to looking at data. One would be the real-time data, and the other one would be the historical data. So um, looking at the data side of things from that perspective, from the time perspective, the real-time data is basically for the role of a process analyst. So, and that is a bit different from a business analyst. The process analyst, one of the main missions, to put it very easily, very bluntly, is to make sure that the process complies with what we envisioned the process to do. So if one of our goals is to increase sales volumes or comply, so we want to increase the customer satisfaction, right? And that's a very generic thing. And then we drill down a bit what that actually means. So the customer satisfaction can be something that translates into responding better and faster, right? So it's something very measurable. And then the process analyst would have to make sure that we actually comply with that. So good news is that with something like Bonita Soft, you can automate much of that. And everything you don't automate, you can at least look at it. So, and that is where real-time statistics come into play. And you use things like the BAM, the BAM, the business administration monitoring of Bonita Soft in this case, in terms of dashboarding. So you look at real-time statistics of how a current process is doing. So for example, if you look at some KPI we wanted to measure in real time, that may be some business data like loan allocation or sales data. So we wanted to sell X amount of products within this queue, within this quarter, or we wanted to achieve a dollar amount of sales. Then we can look at that and compare with real life data. Where am I currently throughout, or with that goal in mind throughout my processes. So how much did my process make sure that we achieve that goal? And the second component for the real-time data is also, and that's a big differentiator if you look at different technologies, right? So one of the things is you can look at it and can look basically like the Bloomberg dashboard, how everything moves, and it looks very fancy. But the trick is what to do about it. And a very effective dashboard is that lets you deal with the levers behind the scenes. So for example, if you look at a result of real-time statistics, we want to allocate $300,000 in new personal loans this month. And I'm currently at $150,000. And we are today at the 23rd of April. So the month is almost over. So the idea is using this dashboard to do something about it. And one of the things I can do about it is maybe incorporating some lever associated and related to the rates, the loan rates we're going to apply, and lower it from maybe 6% to 5.5% if I have the credentials to do so. So I can kind of take action of how the process is behaving in real time and also make sure that we achieve the goals. Another thing would be not actually doing that by hand, but automating this too. So for example, if you look at workloads, and I see that the workload from Delphine is so high that whatever comes new to her is becoming bottleneck. So it's bottlenecked by Delphine because her workload is too high. I can incorporate things like response time measurements automatically in the real-time statistics, where I can say, hey, whenever you exceed a given threshold, you know what? Notify Delphine to see if there's something wrong automatically, or notify her supervisor. Or, you know what? Even better, if we exceed still the time, take the case away and assign it to somebody else in order to leverage the workload. Those are things based upon real-time statistics I can start to automate. As opposed to what you see on the other hand. There's basically what a business analyst would do, historical data, and go through all that information in order to try to identify pattern, right? Pattern recognition, to do the basics of analytics, things like understand what happened, why something happened, and see how we can use it in order to predict some future state. So descriptive analytics, prescriptive analytics, cognitive analytics, kind of things. Where also you open up the gateway to data science, right? Where you kind of use that information not only to describe what, how, and what you can do about it, but also incorporate that into some machine learning algorithms in order to improve some specifics of your process. And going back, basically, you have two components regarding time, something you can use in order to take specific actions while it's still happening with process analysts, and then you look at pattern and existing conditions with historical data with business analysts. But both sets are there. So that
Okay.
was a long,
And if
long
you
answer
want,
to a short question.
yes, and if you want, I can illustrate what you are talking about with 2 or 3 examples coming from Bonita. The first one here, okay, it's okay. And this one is a dashboard made with Bonita UI Designer to express the real-time dashboard, real-time monitoring based on process data. Here we are talking about trading system, and they are following up suppliers and customers references and trading stuff. The most important here, if I come on the slide, is the fact that you can see here how is running and the progress of each case. I mean, the operational, the operation, the for example, the operation manager will be able to see how many tasks have been done in this case. For example, you can see as well on a very easily way, because it's colored, you have a kind of alerting on the risk to um, to exceed the SLA and not meet the goals, the objectives. And here you can see it's green because you have no risk to be late. But here you can see that as you have only done one task over 7, and the request should be done quite soon, it's really risky and it's really urgent to meet the SLA, but maybe we'll have to take actions on that. Then, if we take another kind of report based on business data, here the example is a technical team monitoring quality on different teams and machines. I mean, you have employees working in support team and making sure that the machines are running. They can be electrical, they can be mechanical. So you have different kinds of supplies, and they need to make sure that you maintain a certain level of service, level of quality, of availability and performance on each machine, each supply, and for each employee that is running and owning their machine. All the information here has been done with the UI designer as well, based on the information retrieved in the business data model that is included in Bonita as well. So you will get all the business data that you will need in a dashboard to make sure that you have the right level, the right information. And for example, we can use colors with this widget as well, for example, in order to make sure that you are aligned with the success metrics you had defined before implementing the project in production, or that you have decided with your manager, for example. Here, as you can see, we use different types of widgets. Here you have information coming from another form, and it could be possible, for example, to mix data coming from the process, which means that, for example, you need to make sure that you maintain availability to 80% and you finish all the tasks before, I don't know, tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and you switch off the machine, I don't know, and that's an example. But you could mix both of them, process and data. The only thing that is important is to use different widgets, because with Bonita, at least, if you use the same widgets to talk about different kind of data that are coming from different database, then you could have conflicts in the scripts and the requests. I don't know, Kai, if you have another example of connection between process and business data, or if I go on another
Yeah, no,
report.
maybe here the only thing, yeah, and it's a nice dashboard. Yeah, so independent of the technology you use, I think it's always important to keep in mind good and best practices. Yeah. So again, we are looking at what happens after you implement it, right? You're done, and you have to start measuring. And usually, the first couple of processes, people get very excited and create a whole bunch of dashboards with indicators, widgets all over the place. And while that may be graphically impressive, it doesn't necessarily add value, right? So, and a good dashboard, usually you have something like you see here that is not necessarily cluttered with a whole bunch of different indicators, but maybe some 3, 4 indicators that really make the difference of what the process ought to do. So, and if you eventually, some of you recall the original, when we kicked off the entire series, one of the things we want to make sure before we automate is define strategic goals, right? And he is basically making sure that we have the indicators in place that contribute results to those specific strategic goals. And also another good practice is to put conflicting indicators together. So for example, if you look at, hey, I want to measure sales, right? The volume of sales in dollar amounts. So if I put that alone, it's helpful, and I can drill it down by branch, by region, and whatnot. The classical dashboards you always see. But the important thing is to find something that influences and kind of counteracts in order to do something about it, since we are speaking still about live data, right? So usually it's very easy to comply with sales. So I can sell a whole bunch of things if I lower the price to zero, as we see currently with the barrels of petrol. So yeah, and it's not even easy then, but still, as an example, right? So I can influence, basically, my sales volume by risk or by price, and it would be a good idea to put those two indicators together to see how one influences the other and find the balance, because that is in the end the science of the data analytics side of things, and also looking at your processes. But yeah, good
Mhm.
example.
And that's maybe where BI can help as well, because, for example, if I take the next report here, it's more a report based on process data. It's an historical report where you have analyzed and monitored um, the processes and the cases where you were on time, where you had risk to be late, and you were late. And this kind of report, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm quite sure that this one could be easily included in a BI tool, and you could have a good connection to make sure that you can compare, and then, uh, as you said, have better analysis. And that's why I go to the next slide, because I think it's totally linked.
Yep. Yeah. So he what you see here is basically just a quick example. Yeah, where okay, the core message here would be basically, being aware that BPMS is not in the business of replacing business analytics, business intelligence, or nothing of the sort. So it's just there to kind of open the doors and to provide you with the basics of data to get started within your processes. But it's perfectly compatible, but also suggested that you extend once, and it always has to do and comes back to maturity. So once you have a certain level of understanding what kind of data you have, how to use it, how to use it, and how to access it, then you probably want to go to the next step and extend this information to external tools, external business analytic tools, or business intelligence tools. So that was a quick example we did yesterday, where we kind of threw uh, process and business data over to Soho Analytics, one of many available tools for that, right? So you have things like Power BI, you have Tableau, yeah, Soho Analytics, and a bunch of others, right? Very good tools in that realm. And the idea is not substituting that in any ways, but also making sure that the data is compatible and perfectly accessible. And I think that is one of the advantages that you get with Bonita Soft. So you can easily extend your sets of data in order to say, um, I want to go to the next step. And the next step meaning engage into something more predictive, right? So what you saw and where something like Bonita Soft does an awesome job is visualizing process data, business data, basically everything that goes through the processes. But if you want to then establish something like time series, where you want to go through tendencies and say, well, with a statistical significance of r squared of something like 80% or maybe even more, the next number in terms of sales allocation will be XYZ. So that is something where you would start to look at a BI tool like Tableau or Power BI, or it's like as you see here, Soho Analytics. And then also go steps further with things like Python, R, SAS, or RapidMiner, where you kind of go into and engage in what is known as process mining, data mining, semantic analytics, and whatnot. So basically, it, the idea is being aware that you can, and also that you ought to go the next couple of steps for continuous process improvements with data from there forward.
Yeah, and that's a good transition to the conclusion on this section.
Yeah, the very appetizing peanut butter jelly sandwich we have there. So the idea is that BPM as a concept, right? As a concept, is perfectly compatible and mixes very well with data analytics. So everything that has to do with data science, data analytics, BI is supposed to work hand in hand. So maybe if somebody asks me what to do first and how do I start, just make sure that you design your processes well. You looked at things that really make a difference, not only for the stockholders, but also the stakeholders, and most importantly, the end users of your company. And with that in mind, make sure that all the variables you need for running the processes are there. And once they're there, be assured that you will end up with a bunch of databases behind the scenes that accumulatively will get enriched the longer the process run. Um, and then with that, you can engage in all sorts of data science aspects and activities. Yeah, peanut butter jelly.
Yeah. But okay, data looked good, as we can see, but I think that's not the only thing that is important, no? We have to talk about organization. We were during the first webinar, we were talking about strategy, personas, things like that. What about the organization? You have a clear idea about that, I think, no?
Yeah, yeah. So again, technology without people is kind of a mute point. So you need to make sure that there's a structure. As I stated initially when we started, that there's okay. It's very important to make sure that you have the data, you have the tools, and you have platforms like Bonita in order to make things work. Yeah, but usually, without the right people and without the right methodology, things start to fail. So, and there is a second component that comes into play when it comes to continued enhancements, continued improvements after the fact that we did the first implementation, the first iteration. An iteration, that's a conscious term I use because the idea is that per mission critical process, you do at least 3 or 4 iterations a year. So the processes are supposed to change. If you have a process that's so perfect and nobody touches this in a couple of years, then usually there's something wrong with it. And in order to make that happen and to make that happen right, one of the suggestions, frameworks and concepts like the APPMP, the Association of Business Process Management Professionals, for example, in what they have, their common body of knowledge suggests, and I don't say it's the only way, is to create some center of excellence. So a center of excellence is basically a department, and that doesn't mean that Kai, Delphin, and a bunch of other people have to be hired full time just to do that, but at least that there are people assigned to and responsible and knowledgeable for what you see here on screen. So basically making sure that there's a center of excellence for people that are responsible for the processes in terms of business control, what we just saw, but also translating all those things into technology, the strategic directions and operations, and creating that department. And that's a whole section. I mean, we can and hopefully host soon a webinar around those things, of what it actually means to create such a center, what are the steps, the roles, the resources. But for now, just be aware that something like this is not only like the dot over the I, but it's actually something expected as well in order to make a long-term success or achieve long-term success with BPM. So basically, a couple of benefits, and it's very straightforward, very common sense. So you have things you want to achieve in terms of efficiency, quality, and whatnot. So, but efficiency is focused more on how to make the processes better. Um, so that is also a benefit you get with automating processes themselves. Um, and if you correlate that correctly and extrapolate a bit, um, you won't see many new benefits different from what you heard already about the benefits of automation. So in that sense, the Center of Excellence is to be understood more as a catalyst, an enabler of already existing BPM benefits. So going for making things faster, more efficient, less waste, holds true here as well. So it is not necessarily different from that, but making sure that it actually happens not only once in the initial project, but continuously, right? And a key aspect is to what you see when we speak about a network. So this doesn't mean necessarily the physical networking, but the conceptual network in terms of communication. So one of the biggest responsibilities of the Center of Excellence for BPM holds is making sure that there's a fluent and formal communication that adheres to certain standards, be it making sure that we have sufficient and efficient process documentation in place using standards like, for example, the modeling notation, UML, but also other artifacts that they are in place, continuously updated and improved upon, and that this information flows to all the stakeholders that have to do with automation to make sure that everybody understands why, how, and what we are going to do. Yeah. So in the end, as always, it always is supposed to translate into monetary benefits in terms of return on investment and other things.
Okay, and just quickly, that's where you want to go further and build a full competency model.
Yeah, exactly. So if somebody wants to, yeah, and again, that's from the APPMP, from the Association of Business Process Management Professionals. So if somebody wants to certify in a formal manner to do standards, to do frameworks and concepts, they can do so. So per role, and there are others as well, right? But being knowledgeable about the fact that per role, in this case, a process analyst, an architect, or the chief process architect, each of those levels of maturity have a formalized path for a formalized certification. In this case, the process associate, the professional, and the business leader.
Okay, that's great because here we have the whole strategy in order to monitor and optimize all the, well, I would say business model and all the organization. But in order to support that, you have to keep in mind that you don't have to forget that you need a platform that will be robust enough, scalable enough, and well maintained to support all your processes and what you are going to define in your strategy. That's why the other side of the optimization is really to maintain, to monitor, and to improve your platform as well. So if we start with the maintenance of the platform, the maintenance of the platform, if I take Bonita example, the process administrator will be able to monitor the open and archived cases, manage the applications, resources, manage the business data model, access control, and also work directly in production on the platform to perform what we talk live updates. Why? Because Bonita has been built in order to make sure that the administrator would get a direct access from Bonita portal to all the administration resources in order not to have to deploy a new release each time you want to do a change. That's where we have the live updates, where you can change if you configured it before in the studio in your first iteration. For example, the parameters change, the connectors, widgets, and sometimes the forms as well. In order to make sure that, for example, if you have to fix something quickly, you will be agile and your users won't have to wait until you release a new version of your process before having an update and a fix for their issue. Then, and if I take examples like that, you will see that the administrator will have a graphical view of all the thing it needs to monitor. I have not had it here. That something that is also very interesting is the graphical view of your process. You can see each step, and you will have in the steps the cases that are healthy, that you can see in green here in the table, that will be in green as well. And you will see, for example, if there are cases with failures at some step of the process, you will see them in red as well. So you can see exactly where you have to take actions. And that's something you can do quickly in the tabs by filtering by process name, for example, versions, and activate. So you can take actions when you are an administrator, or on a macro view, or on a very specific way. As the production environment is, it's crucial to ensure runtime to correctly work. As I said, you have to ensure reliability, scalability, robustness. You have to make sure it will be agile and adapt to the changes that we talked about before. So you monitor your processes, but you will also make sure that your platform is robust enough and it's serving the needs of your users in terms of capacity, of rapidity, and so on. So with Bonita, for example, if we take the example of our platform, you will have also the ability to monitor the engine. And that's important because then it will help you sizing and tuning your servers on a precise way. So we will help you properly size, tune your production environment to make sure that it will reach the performance you are expected. And it will be done at various levels. First of all, the hardware. For example, you can work work on the CPU usage, on the memory usage. If you use containers, for example, Docker, you can work on logs in order to make sure that you will get enough information. Talking about the JVM, you're going to work on the HIP and the threads. That's something we had already talked about in our last chapter, and that is available in the documentation. But you are going also to work on data. And for example, if you want to act on your application server, you are going to work on the database connection pool, for example, the number of workers as well in the engine, your database, the number of connections, how the transactions are working, the size of your database. Just talking about that, if you have a big workload, that's important as well. And finally, the application itself, the response time, the workload you will allow, and then you will have to think about it when you are designing your processes. And as I said before, you will start thinking about it before going in production, and you will optimize it by monitoring when you are in production. So in order to do it efficiently, you will get, for example, from Bonita, a series of technical and Bonita related metrics that can be by default or that you can add optionally. For example, you can you can monitor the current running works, the pending works, the queue, or, for example, the number of connector works. That's very important as connectors and workers are combined together, and that the performance can be affected by issues with them as well. If you want details, sorry, that's what I was thinking about. If you want more details, you can refer to the documentation or the blog that is linked here in the slides. So we were talking about the engine. Your engine has to be robust, but also it has to be scalable. And that's very important as well. Why? Because you cannot predict the future. That's you will try to using the data, the process analytics, all what we talked about before, but you cannot predict everything. And sometimes you can have unpredictable peaks of loads, changes in the organization. Your company can buy another one where you will have to double the number of users. I don't know, but this can happen. And you want to make sure that you will give the same level of service to your users. So if it's critical, you have to think about scalability. And how can you do that? By analyzing the use cases. What are the processes about? What are they doing? For whom? How are they interacting? How critical are they? You have to better understand the goals and the limitation of what you have deployed in order to and iterate on the processes, but also on the configuration of your platform. The final goal is to guarantee the user satisfaction. How you are going to do that? You are going to scale vertically by adding CPUs, adding memory, but also horizontally in order to, for example, guarantee high availability, adding nodes, putting active clusters in order to make sure that you will be performant and have the service every time. But there is another option. If you want to get rid of all those maintenance stuff, make sure that your service will be adapted and agile depending on the workload, on the users, on the service needs. You have another option, which is requiring to be hosted by another provider. We all know AWS. Customers can, for example, build a private cloud. You can use AWS. Bonita, for example, is using AWS for some processes. You can use Azure or other clouds, or you can use Bonita Cloud. But here, what is important is the fact that thanks to cloud providers, you will be able to scale with the customer business needs. How? You will enable more environment rapidly if it's needed. You will make sure that the infrastructure is going to scale with the usage needs, especially, for example, if your process has peaks, it can be very important. You will avoid the burden of provisioning scaling. Then it will help accelerating innovation. For example, if I talk about Bonita Cloud, you will be able to be on the latest version of Bonita all the time, because if you are in the cloud, our teams are going to upgrade for you. You will have access to full continuous delivery approach and tools for an iterative application development. And that's something that works pretty well if you want to be successful. Step by step, iterate and automate. And for example, you will also have the option to reduce cost, not only by scaling, but also because you will have a no-ops offer. So you will have no initial provisioning investments. You will also have a continuity of service that will be guaranteed, because a cloud provider always has SLAs, and it will be able to offer strict SLAs that maybe in your organization you are not going to meet. Then, and finally, and that's important as well, your applications will be secured. For example, you have the AWS certifications, which are high. In Bonita, for example, we collaborate as well with cybersecurity experts for continuous security reinforcement. You can make sure that you will have privacy and security if you build a private cloud as well. And when you refer to an infrastructure as a service partner, they are obliged to provide strong security certifications. So security is always here with this option. So if you need flexibility, if you don't have resources internally to maintain your platform, and if you also want to make sure that your environment, if it's critical, can be performant, that can be an option. In any case, except if you are in a cloud environment, because Bonita, for example, will do it for you, you have to think about your iterations and upgrades in production. And that's something important as well. Why? Because upgrading is not like clicking on a button. For example, on my Mac, sometimes I have updates and they say, oh, click, and I click in 2 seconds, it's done. No, because here you have data. As Kai said before, you have a lot of data, and those data change regularly. And more than that, you have connectors that are integrated with other systems. So everything is totally integrated and has to remain consistent even if you change your Bonita version. So you have to think and anticipate how you are going to release and think about your project release cycle versus Bonita release cycle. We have two release per years, so that's a way to identify clearly how you want to do. Then you have to be consistent with your development upgrades and make sure that, for example, if in order to avoid errors, human errors, that you use end-to-end automation. And of course, test your upgrades in pre-production, before doing that in production in order to avoid issues with your data, for example. So if I conclude, we are in a continuous improvement of your application, but also of your platform. So you have to identify bottlenecks and dysfunctions. You have to compare success metrics and real results to make sure that you are still aligned. Talk to your users. Tools are not going to do everything. As Kai said, human is the core of your processes and your optimization. So get their feedback. Iterate to improve. It's better to do step by step than trying to do everything in a row and fail. And then automate a maximum, because then you will be faster, more efficient, and you will avoid human errors. So we still have 5 minutes and we are almost done of the series as well. You should have everything you need to go on, and then you can ask questions about it. We will remain at your disposal. So I will let Kai conclude on our methodology series. It's a good way to close the loop, I think.
Yeah, sure. So basically, here we draw also some parallels to existing methodologies and frameworks, right? Here, for example, if you see on the right, the small graphic from the APPMP, the most important thing to rescue here is to structure and make it, as you rightly stated, Delphine, an iterative approach. So something where you still, yesterday, for example, with a group of users, we went through the advantages versus disadvantages in order to do something like digital transformation, right? So yeah, why we all want to transform for the better and actually transform, so meaning that we do something significantly different as we did before. It doesn't mean we do have to do everything at once. So do that as a structured and iterative progressive approach. And with that, you see the project phases, and we are currently basically at phase 5, phase 6, where we kind of take everything into account, but not only relying exclusively on data, but also mix that together with the right set of people and the right set of methodology in order to kind of instrument the data and assure success with that. And most importantly, as you see here at the last point, embrace change and have fun. And that may be difficult to do nowadays, but still, the good news is we can. We have the data, we have the people, we can train ourselves and follow approved methodology in order to make those things happen. So yeah, the journey is basically that: prepare, execute well, be conscious about the phases of the project, take the data, take the people, analyze, and improve upon that.
Yeah, that's right. And at Bonita, we have fun with Bonita, so we are
Exactly.
aligned. Thank you very much, Kai. That was
My
a
pleasure.
pleasure to do that again with you. I always like to do those webinars with you. I see that we have few questions. We still have 2 minutes for you because then you have
To run
to
to next meeting, to automate.
Yes, exactly. But just in case, I can stay 5 minutes more in order to answer other questions if needed. So, which report tool is used to create the dashboard? Dominic, I don't know if you which dashboard you are talking about. It depends. So if I come back to the dashboards quickly, we have dashboards that are created using the UI designer. So you can use the widgets that are in UI designer. You add your dashboards, then you add the layout and the structure, and you can, thanks to the contract and the use of the BDM, or thanks to APIs that are going to do requests in the engine, you can build dashboards like that, even with the community versions. Yes. With the enterprise version, the difference is that you are going to use fragments if you want. But in the community, you can do this kind of dashboard. If you are talking about this report is coming from an add-on in Bonita that is called BC, Bonita Intelligent Continuous Improvement, based on Elasticsearch, and also retrieving data from the processes and the cases and doing predictions.
Exactly. Here the importance is the BC is not limited by Bonita soft data, right? So you can also use that in order to get external data sources and incorporate that into your dashboards too, right?
Yeah. I hope it answers your questions. And then, okay, Mutu, I see you ask if we could have this sample model to learn and to use in education. I'm not sure to understand what you talk about when you say sample model.
Yeah, so maybe okay, yeah, maybe if I read that right, and then I have to run. Yeah, it's basically for training. Yeah, so if that is, and I may be wrong, but if that is the question, yeah, Monitasoft does have a formal training setup. So if you want to learn and practice and use examples in order to see how this is done, yeah, Bonitasoft has courses. Yeah, you can do also online and certify yourself and learn exactly the specifics on the practical from a practical perspective. And usually, companies like ourselves, like NSI, we complement that with practical coaching. For example, if somebody wants to certify, but wants to have like a couple of sessions, like practical sessions where you train and use real data in order to see how you do that for your own information, then we can complement that with services. But basically, it's just a matter of requesting it, and either Bonitasoft and or somebody like a partner can help you with that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining. I've got to run. So yeah,
Yes,
thank
I
you
know,
again,
Kai.
Delphine.
Thank you very much. That
Thanks
was a
everybody.
real pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye. I don't know if we have another question. I can take a last question. I'm sorry we were a bit tight on time, but we had a lot to say in this section. Just something I wanted to tell you. If you want to get more details about scalability, about the engine monitoring, or as well about process analytics, we have videos on YouTube that are going deeper into details. And if you have questions, of course, or I remain at your disposal, or you can go to the community website and ask your questions, and we will answer, of course. I have a last question. Is Bonita able to process unstructured data? From John. Actually, yes, it is. It is using, so the data will be, you can come from your database, as we said, Elasticsearch, or for example, you can use a MongoDB, and it will be retrieved through API to be used. But it's kind of, you will need to develop a bit to process it. BC is only enterprise? Yes, it is. It is an enterprise module. We are currently working in the teams and the process labs on process analytics. I still don't know how it will be done. We are working on it in order to make sure that we use process analytics, process mining, and we create something totally well, usable, as we said. But for the time being, we have stopped the development on BC in order to make sure that we align with the process analytics and process mining research. Let's conclude this webinar. I want to thank you all and take care of you, especially in those times. You will have the video within a few days, the maximum. If you have other questions, feel free to ask. And it was a pleasure to do this series about methodologies and practices. We tried to do blog post out of it, so that you can still have information and use it if you need. Thank you. Have a good day or a good evening, and talk to you soon on other subjects. Bye bye.